Millionaire CEO opened the door for his blind date, then froze when she whispered. Alexander Pierce had everything a man could want at 34, a penthouse overlooking the city, a company worth hundreds of millions, influence that opened every door, respect that commanded every room. But success had come with a price he'd never intended to pay, complete and utter loneliness that no amount of money could fill. His business partner Marcus had been pestering him for months to start dating again, to find someone who could see past the wealth to the man underneath. Alexander always refused, claimed he was too busy, that relationships were distractions he couldn't afford. The truth was harder to admit. He'd given his heart away once, years ago, and never quite figured out how to get it back. But tonight, worn down by Marcus's relentless insistence and his own growing awareness that empty penthouses stayed empty no matter how expensive they were, Alexander had finally agreed to a blind date. He'd arrived at Marcello's, the upscale Italian restaurant, where reservations took months to secure, expecting another polite conversation with someone impressed by his resume, but uninterested in his reality. When his phone buzzed with Marcus's text, "She's outside. Go open the door like a gentleman." Alexander stood reluctantly, smoothed his designer suit more from habit than care, and walked to the entrance with the resigned attitude of someone fulfilling an obligation. But the moment he opened that door, the moment he saw her standing there in a simple pastel dress with her hands nervously clasped and her expression caught between hesitation and hope, his entire world stopped spinning. Because she tilted her head in that achingly familiar way and whispered in a voice that haunted his dreams for 12 years, "You don't remember me, do you?" And Alexander Pierce, the man who never lost his composure in million-dollar negotiations, froze completely, because standing in front of him was Clara Bennett, his first love, the girl he'd abandoned to chase his dreams, the one who got away and took half his heart with her. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is. If you love stories about second chances and lost love finding its way home, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We share powerful stories about love, redemption, and the courage to try again every single week. Now, let's get into it. 6 hours earlier, Alexander had stood in his penthouse bathroom, staring at his reflection with the kind of resignation usually reserved for dental appointments and tax audits. His assistant had laid out 3 different suits, all expensive, all perfectly tailored, all equally meaningless when you had no one to dress up for. He chose the charcoal grey Tom Ford, paired it with a white shirt and burgundy tie, and told himself this was just another business obligation. Except business obligations didn't make his stomach knot, with a combination of dread and desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, Marcus was right, and this wouldn't be a complete waste of an evening. "You need this," Marcus had insisted during their lunch meeting 2 days ago. "Alex, you're 34 years old, richer than most people dream of being, and you go home to an empty apartment every night and eat takeout alone. That's not living, that's just existing with better furniture." "I'm fine," Alexander had protested, the lie automatic after years of practice. "You're miserable. And before you deny it again, I've known you for 8 years, I can tell." Marcus had leaned forward, his expression shifting from teasing to genuinely concerned. "When's the last time you went on an actual date? Not a networking dinner where someone's sister happened to be there. A real date with someone who doesn't know your net worth before they know your name." Her hands were clasped in front of her, fingers intertwined in a gesture he recognized as nervous energy she was trying to contain. And when she looked up at him, her brown eyes, those impossibly kind brown eyes he'd never been able to find in anyone else, widened with recognition and something that looked like pain mixed with disbelief. She tilted her head slightly, in that achingly familiar way she used to when she was trying to figure something out, and whispered in a voice that hit him like a physical blow, "You don't remember me, kid, do you?" Alexander couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stare at the woman he'd spent 12 years trying to forget and failing every single day. Clara. Her name came out rough, choked, barely audible. "So you do remember." Her whisper carried years of hurt, of questions never answered, of promises broken and trust shattered. Alexander's mind was racing, trying to process the impossibility of this moment. Clara. Here. Now. On a blind date that was supposed to be with a stranger, except she wasn't a stranger at all. She was the ghost that had haunted every empty achievement, every hollow success. Every night he'd lain awake wondering what his life would have been if he'd made different choices. He started to speak, but couldn't find words adequate for this moment. What did you say to the woman whose heart you'd broken when you'd promised to protect it? How did you explain 12 years of silence, of cowardice disguised as ambition? People were starting to notice them standing in the doorway. The maitre d' approached discreetly. "Mr. Pierce, is everything all right? Shall I show you and the lady to your table?" "Yes," Alexander managed, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. "Thank you." He stepped aside to let Clara enter, and as she passed him, he caught the faint scent of jasmine. The same perfume she'd worn in college, the scent he'd once bought for her when she mentioned loving it, but never being able to afford it. The memory hit him with the force of a tidal wave. Her delight at the gift, the way she'd kissed him in gratitude, the promise he'd made that someday he'd be successful enough to buy her anything she wanted. He'd achieved the success, but he'd lost the girl. They followed the maitre d' through the restaurant in complete silence. Alexander was hyper-aware of every step Clara took, every breath she drew, every small movement that reminded him she was real, and this was actually happening. The table was perfect, intimate, private, with flickering candlelight and a view of the city that usually impressed his dinner companions. But Clara barely glanced at the ambiance. She sat down carefully, like she was preparing for something difficult, and folded her hands on the table in that same nervous gesture from outside. Alexander sat across from her, and for a long moment, they just looked at each other. 12 years collapsed into nothing. He could see traces of the girl he'd known, the same kind eyes, the same gentle smile that now carried sadness, but she'd changed too. There was a guardedness that hadn't been there before, a wariness that came from being hurt and learning to protect yourself. He'd done that to her, put that wariness in her eyes, taught her to be careful with her heart because the person she'd trusted most had treated it carelessly. "I can't believe this," Clara finally said, her voice stronger now but still carrying disbelief. "Of all the people in this city, you're my blind date." "I had no idea," Alexander said quickly, needing her to understand this wasn't some manipulation. "Marcus set this up. I didn't know it was you. I swear, Clara, I had no idea." "Marcus?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course. He's married to Sarah, my colleague. She's been trying to set me up for months." Clara shook her head. "They have no idea, do they? That we know each other?" "No, I never told Marcus about us. About you. About me." Clara's eyes flashed with something, hurt maybe, or anger. "The girl you left behind to chase your dreams, the one who wasn't important enough to mention to your business partner." Alexander flinched. Every word was deserved, every accusation earned. "It wasn't like that." "No." Clara leaned forward slightly. "Then what was it like, Alexander? Because from where I sat, it looked a lot like you got on a train to California, promised you'd come back for me once you were established, and then disappeared for 12 years. No calls, no letters, nothing." The waiter approached to take their order, but Alexander waved him away with a gesture that probably came across as more imperious than he intended. They needed privacy for this conversation, needed space to navigate the minefield of their shared past without an audience. "I'm sorry," he said, knowing how inadequate the words were. "Clara, I'm so sorry for everything, for leaving, for not coming back, for not calling, for all of it. Sorry." She repeated the word like she was testing its weight. 12 years and all I get is sorry. What do you want me to say? That I was young and stupid and so focused on success that I forgot what actually mattered? That I convinced myself you'd moved on and forgotten me because it was easier than facing what I'd done? His voice was rising despite his efforts to stay calm. That I've compared every woman I've met to you for over a decade and none of them ever measured up because none of them were you? Clara's eyes widened, and Alexander realized he'd said more than he intended. revealed more than was probably wise. But sitting across from her, seeing the evidence of his mistakes written in the guardedness of her expression, he couldn't find it in himself to hold back anymore. "You compared other women to me," Clara said slowly. "While I spent 3 years waiting for you to keep your promises, while I turned down dates because I was convinced you'd come back, while I finally accepted you weren't coming and tried to move on with a broken heart." Her voice caught. "You don't get to act like you were the one who suffered, Alexander. You made a choice. You chose ambition over me, success over us. That was your decision. You're right." Alexander knew arguing would only make this worse. "You're absolutely right. I made that choice, and I've regretted it every single day since." "Have you?" The question was sharp. "Because from where I'm sitting, you look pretty successful. CEO of Pierce Technologies, multi-millionaire, powerful and respected. Doesn't look like you've suffered much from your choices." "I have everything," Alexander admitted quietly, "except the one thing that actually matters. I have success and money and respect, and I go home every night to an empty penthouse and wonder what my life would have been if I'd kept my promises to you." Clara looked away, staring out the window at the city lights. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Why didn't you call, even once, just to tell me you weren't coming back? You could have given me that closure instead of leaving me hanging for 3 years." This was the question Alexander had been dreading, the one he'd asked himself 1,000 times. "Cowardice," he said honestly. "Pure cowardice. Every day I told myself I'd call tomorrow, once the project was finished or the deal was closed or the company was stable. And then tomorrow came and there was always another excuse, another reason to wait. And the longer I waited, the bigger my guilt grew, until I convinced myself you'd moved on, and hearing from me would just be unwelcome. So you made that decision for me," Clara said. "Decided I'd moved on without actually asking if I had." "Yes, I'm not defending it, just explaining. I was a coward, Clara. I hurt you because I was too weak to face what I'd done. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not even sure I deserved the chance to ask." The waiter returned, and this time Alexander didn't wave him away. They both ordered without really paying attention, Clara choosing pasta, Alexander ordering something he'd forget the moment the waiter left. The ritual of ordering gave them both a moment to breathe, to process, to figure out what came next. After the waiter left, Clara looked at him directly for the first time since they'd sat down. "I waited for 3 years, Alexander. 3 years of my life. Do you know what that cost me? I was offered a job in New York with a great school, turned it down because I thought you'd be coming back to Chicago, was asked out by a man who was kind and present and actually there, said no because I was convinced you'd keep your promises, spent my early 20s in a holding pattern because I believed in the person you'd shown me you were." Every word was a knife. Alexander absorbed them all, knowing he deserved worse. "I'm sorry isn't enough. I know that. But I don't know what else to say." "What happened after you left?" Clara asked. "Just tell me that. Tell me what was so important that it cost us everything." Alexander took a breath, knowing this explanation wouldn't excuse anything but needing her to understand anyway. The startup was supposed to be a 3-month contract, help them launch their platform, then come home. But the first week there, they offered me equity. Said if I stayed and helped them build it, I'd have a stake in something that could be huge. And you said yes. I said yes. Told myself it would just be 6 more months, then a year, then I'd come back with actual money, with something to offer you beyond promises. The company exploded faster than anyone expected. Within 2 years, we were being courted by major investors. Within 5 years, I had enough money to start Pierce Technologies. And you never once thought to pick up the phone and tell me any of this. Clara's voice was quiet but devastating. I thought about it constantly. But what was I supposed to say? Sorry I broke my promises, but look how successful I am. How could I call you after months of silence and expect you to still care? The shame of what I'd done got bigger every day, and eventually it felt impossible to overcome. Clara was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her water glass. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weariness that broke Alexander's heart. You know what the worst part was? Not the silence, not even the broken promises. It was that I blamed myself. Alexander's head snapped up. What? I spent years thinking I wasn't enough, that if I'd been prettier, smarter, more interesting, you would have fought harder to come back. That somehow I was the problem, the reason you could walk away so easily. Clara, no, I know better now, she interrupted. Therapy helped with that. But for a long time, I carried that weight. Thought there was something fundamentally lacking in me that made me forgettable. The guilt Alexander had been carrying for 12 years intensified to something physically painful. You were never forgettable. You are, the most unforgettable person I've ever met. The problem was never you. It was always me, my ambition, my pride, my cowardice. Then why am I here? Clara asked, her eyes searching his face. Why did you agree to this blind date if you've been so hung up on the past? Because Marcus was right. I'm 34, successful beyond anything I imagined and completely alone. I've built this incredible life on paper, and it's empty. I agreed to the date because I was tired of going home to that emptiness. He paused. I've been looking for you in every woman I've met, trying to find what we had with someone else. It never worked, because there is no replacement for you. Clara shook her head slowly. You can't just say things like that, Alexander. Not after 12 years, you don't get to show up and act like... I know I don't have that right, but I'm being honest because you deserve honesty. You deserved it 12 years ago, and I failed you. The least I can do now is tell you the truth. Their food arrived, and they both stared at their plates without touching them. The weight of 12 years sat between them like a third presence at the table, demanding acknowledgement. Tell me about your life, Alexander said finally. Please, tell me what happened after I left. Clara considered him for a moment, then seemed to decide that fair was fair. I finished my degree, education, like I planned. Took a job teaching 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary. It's not glamorous. The pay is modest, but I love it. You always wanted to teach, Alexander remembered. You used to talk about it constantly, making a difference in kids' lives. I do. My students are incredible. Challenging sometimes, but incredible. I've been at the same school for 9 years now. She took a small bite of pasta. I have a small apartment not far from the school. Drive the same car I've had for 7 years. Live a simple life. Are you happy? The question seemed to catch her off guard. Yes, mostly. My life has meaning. I have friends, work I care about, students who matter to me. It's not the life I imagined when I was 22 and in love with you, but it's a good life. Mostly happy, Alexander echoed. What would make it completely happy? I don't know if completely happy exists, Clara said thoughtfully. I think there are always things we wonder about, paths not taken, questions unanswered. Like us? She met his eyes. Like us. The admission hung between them, heavy with possibility and pain. I never married, Clara said after a moment. Dated a few people over the years. Nothing serious. My friends think I'm too picky. Maybe they're right. Or maybe I just... She trailed off. Maybe you just what? Maybe I never got over you. The words came out barely above a whisper. God, that sounds pathetic, doesn't it? The girl who waited 3 years and couldn't fully move on even after accepting you weren't coming back. It's not pathetic, Alexander said urgently. Clara, I never married either, never even came close. Do you know why? Because you were too busy building your empire? Because no one was you. No one made me laugh like you did. No one challenged me or supported me or believed in me the way you did. No one fit with me the way you did. He leaned forward. I convinced myself I was over you. Told myself you were a college romance I'd outgrown. But the truth is, I measured every woman against you and they all fell short. Not because they weren't wonderful people, but because they weren't the person I'd given my heart to when I was 22 years old. Clara's eyes were shining with tears she was clearly trying not to shed. "You can't just say these things, Alexander. You can't show up after 12 years and expect—" "I don't expect anything," he interrupted. "I have no right to expect anything from you. I just need you to know the truth. I need you to know that leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life, that I've regretted it every single day, that every success I achieved felt hollow because I had no one genuine to share it with. You had plenty of people to share it with, business partners, investors, probably a dozen women who would have been thrilled to be with a successful millionaire. People who wanted Alexander Pierce, CEO, he corrected. Not Alex, the person. You're the only one who ever knew Alex, who loved him before the money and success and public image. You're the only person who saw me, really saw me, and thought I was worth loving for who I was, not what I could provide." Clara wiped at her eyes with her napkin. "I did love you, so much it hurt. And when you didn't come back, when you stopped calling, it felt like I'd lost a part of myself. I'm so sorry." Alexander reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand, asking permission. "Clara, I'm so sorry for hurting you, for being selfish and cowardly, for choosing wrong when I should have chosen you." She looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment, then slowly placed hers in it. The touch was electric, familiar, achingly right. Alexander felt something in his chest release, a tension he'd been carrying for so long, he'd forgotten it was there. "I don't know what we're doing," Clara said quietly. "I don't know if this is closure or something else. I don't know if I can trust you not to hurt me again. I understand. I know I broke your trust. I know I'd have to earn it back, if you even wanted to give me that chance." He squeezed her hand gently. "But Clara, I have to tell you, sitting here with you, talking to you, touching you, this is the most real I've felt in 12 years. Everything else has been performance. This is the only thing that feels true." "It feels true for me too," she admitted, "and that terrifies me, because what if this is just nostalgia? What if we're remembering what we had and forgetting that we're different people now? You're a CEO, I'm a school teacher. We live in completely different worlds. So we figure out if our worlds can fit together, if you're willing to try." "Are you asking me for a second chance?" Alexander took a breath, knowing this was the most important pitch he'd ever make. "I'm asking if you'll let me prove that I've learned from my mistakes, that I know now what matters, that I won't make the same choices I made before. I'm asking for the opportunity to show you that the boy you loved grew into a man who finally understands what he lost. And that man wants nothing more than the chance to make things right." Clara pulled her hand back, and Alexander's heart sank. But then she picked up her fork, took a deliberate bite of pasta and said, "Tell me about your life, your real life, not the CEO version. Tell me about who you are now." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was a door left open, an invitation to show her he was worth the risk. Alexander started talking. He told her about the loneliness of success, about penthouse dinners eaten alone while reviewing contracts, about friendships that felt transactional, where everyone wanted something from him, about his mother who worried he was becoming his father, a man who'd built a successful law firm but died alone because he'd prioritized work over relationships. He told her about the moments he'd thought of her over the years, the time he'd seen a woman in a bookstore with dark hair and his heart had stopped until she turned around and wasn't Clara. The night he'd had too much scotch and almost called her, dialing 8 of the 10 digits before his cowardice won again, the countless times he'd composed emails and letters he never sent. And Clara listened, really listened, the way she always had. She asked questions, challenged his assumptions, called him out when he was making excuses, and slowly, over the course of 2 hours and cold pasta neither of them really ate, they began to remember who they'd been to each other. Not just romantic partners, but best friends. People who could talk about anything, who challenged each other to be better, who saw past surfaces to the truth underneath. "I missed this," Alexander said, as their server, who'd been patiently avoiding their table, finally approached with the check, talking to someone who doesn't want anything from me except honesty. "I missed it too," Clara admitted. "I forgot what it was like to have a conversation that wasn't small talk or professional courtesy, to talk to someone who actually knew me before I became the person I pretend to be for the world. Alexander paid the check. Clara tried to protest, but he insisted, and they stood to leave. The restaurant was nearly empty now, their table having become an island where time moved differently. Outside, the night air was cool. They stood on the sidewalk, neither quite ready to say goodbye, both aware that whatever happened next would determine everything. "Can I drive you home?" Alexander asked. Clara hesitated. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because if you drive me home, we'll keep talking, and if we keep talking, I might start believing this is real. And if I start believing it's real, I'll be vulnerable again, and I'm not sure I can survive you breaking my heart twice." The honesty gutted him. "I understand. But Clara, I need you to know something. I can't undo the past. I can't give you back the 3 years you waited or erase the pain I caused. But if you give me a chance, just one chance, I will spend every single day proving you weren't wrong to believe in me back then." That's a big promise from someone who broke his last promises to me. "I know. That's why I'm asking you to let me prove it, not just believe it. Let me show you through actions, not words." Clara looked at him for a long moment, and Alexander saw the war happening behind her eyes, the girl who'd loved him fighting with the woman who'd learned to protect herself. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. You can drive me home. But Alexander, I need you to understand something. If we're going to try this, and I'm not saying we are, I'm saying if, then it has to be different this time. I can't be the person you leave behind when work gets demanding. I can't be second place to your ambition." "You wouldn't be. Clara, you'd be first, always first." "That's easy to say now, but I need to see it proven over time. I need to know that when it gets hard, when work pulls at you, you'll choose us. Choose me." "I will. I promise." She smiled sadly. "You promised before too." "I know, and that's why I know how much promises matter. I won't make ones I can't keep this time." They walked to his car, a sleek BMW that made Clara raise her eyebrows but not comment. The drive to her apartment took 20 minutes, and they spent it continuing their conversation, filling in 12 years of gaps. Alexander learned about her students, her friends, her small but meaningful life. Clara learned about his company, his frustrations with corporate culture, his attempts to stay grounded despite success. When they arrived at her building, a modest complex in a quiet neighborhood, Alexander walked her to her door like they were 22 again, and he was dropping her off after a college date. "This is me," Clara said, stopping at apartment 4B. "Can I see you again?" Alexander asked. "Not as a blind date, as us, whatever us is now." Clara pulled out her keys, considering. "Call me tomorrow. Let me think about this when I'm not overwhelmed by the shock of seeing you again. Let me figure out if this is a good idea, or just my heart overruling my common sense." "Fair enough. Can I have your number? I deleted it years ago because seeing it and not being brave enough to call was too painful." She rattled off her number, and Alexander saved it immediately, terrified it might disappear if he waited. "Good night, Alexander." "Good night, Clara." She hesitated at her door, then turned back. "Thank you for being honest tonight, for not pretending the past didn't happen or that what you did was okay. The honesty means something." "You deserve honesty. You always did." Clara nodded, then disappeared inside her apartment, leaving Alexander standing in the hallway feeling like he'd been given something precious and fragile that he couldn't afford to break again. As he drove home to his empty penthouse, Alexander's phone buzzed. Marcus. "How did it go?" "Sarah's dying to know." Alexander smiled, despite the emotional exhaustion. "I'm going to marry her." "What? It went that well? I knew you two would click." "Marcus, that was Clara." There was a long pause, then, "Clara? You're Clara? From college? The one you never talk about, but I know broke your heart." "I didn't break her heart. She broke mine, by being everything I'd been looking for and giving me a second chance I don't deserve." "Alex, I had no idea. Sarah never mentioned—" "Oh God, she doesn't know either. She just knows Clara from work. This is insane." Insane. But maybe the best kind of insane. So what happens now? Alexander looked at Clara's contact information glowing on his screen. Now I prove I'm worth the risk, however long it takes. Alexander didn't sleep that night. He lay in his king-sized bed in his empty penthouse, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. Every word Clara had said, every expression that had crossed her face, every second of her hand in his. By the time dawn broke over the city, he'd made a decision. He wouldn't wait until a socially acceptable hour to call her. If he was serious about proving he'd changed, about prioritizing her, then it started now. At 7 a.m., he texted, "I know you said to call later, but I couldn't wait. I've been thinking about you all night. Can I take you to breakfast? Or coffee? Or just see you for 5 minutes? I promise not to be pushy. I don't want to lose another day." He stared at his phone, anxiety building with each passing minute. What if she'd woken up this morning and realized giving him a second chance was a mistake? What if the shock had worn off and reality had set in? 10 minutes later, his phone buzzed. "You're lucky I'm an early riser. Coffee at 8:30? There's a place near my apartment. Nothing fancy." Alexander typed back immediately, "Send me the address. I'll be there." The cafe Clara had chosen was called Bean There, a small neighborhood spot with mismatched furniture and chalkboard menus. It was the complete opposite of the places Alexander usually frequented. No designer everything, no servers in crisp uniforms, just good coffee and the comfortable chaos of regulars who clearly knew each other. Clara was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 mugs in front of her. She'd dressed casually, jeans and a soft sweater, and looked more like the girl he'd known in college than the guarded woman from last night. "I ordered for you," she said as he sat down. "Black coffee, 2 sugars, unless you've changed." "I haven't changed." Alexander wrapped his hands around the mug, touched that she'd remembered. Not about coffee, or about a lot of things. "I didn't sleep much," Clara admitted. "Kept thinking about last night. About whether I'm being incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "What did you decide?" "Haven't yet. That's why I agreed to coffee. Figured I'd see if last night was real or just a moment of nostalgia-induced insanity." "And?" Alexander's heart was pounding. Clara took a sip of her coffee, studying him over the rim. "You're really here? At 8:30 in the morning? At a neighborhood cafe that probably doesn't even have valet parking?" "I parked 2 blocks away. Didn't mind the walk." The Alexander I knew 12 years ago would have minded, would have considered this place beneath him once he got successful. "Then I'm glad I'm not that Alexander anymore." He leaned forward. "Clara, I know you're testing me, seeing if I'll fit into your world instead of expecting you to fit into mine. I get it. And I want you to know, your world is more real than anything I've built. This coffee shop has more authenticity in one corner than my entire corporate headquarters." "Don't romanticize my life," Clara said, but there was a slight smile. "It's not all charming coffee shops and meaningful work. It's also grading papers at midnight and using grocery coupons and driving a car that makes concerning noises. Tell me about it. Tell me about your real life. I want to know everything." So Clara did. Over the next hour, she painted a picture of her daily existence, early mornings preparing lesson plans, days filled with 8-year-olds who were simultaneously exhausting and inspiring, evenings spent with her friend group that included other teachers, a librarian, and a nurse. She talked about her tiny apartment that she'd decorated with thrift store finds, her weekend routine of farmers markets and free museum days, the satisfaction of living within her means. "It sounds perfect," Alexander said when she finished. "It's not perfect, it's just real, and it's enough." She paused. "Or it was enough, until last night reminded me of what I'd convinced myself I didn't need anymore." "What's that?" "You." The admission seemed to cost her something. I'd made peace with being alone, told myself I was complete without a relationship, and maybe I was. But seeing you again made me remember what it felt like to want someone, to want you. Alexander reached across the table, and this time Clara didn't hesitate. She placed her hand in his immediately. "I want you too. I've wanted you for 12 years. I was just too cowardly to do anything about it." "So what do we do now?" Clara asked. "We can't just pick up where we left off. Too much time has passed. We're different people." "Then we start new. Get to know who we are now instead of who we were then. Date like we're meeting for the first time, except with the advantage of already knowing we're capable of loving each other." "And what about our different lives? I'm a teacher making 40,000 a year. You're a CEO making, I don't even want to know. How do we bridge that gap?" "We figure it out together. Clara, I don't care about the money. I'd give it all up if it meant having you back." "Don't say things like that. You don't mean it." "I do mean it. What's the point of being wealthy if I'm miserable? I'd rather be happy with you in a studio apartment than alone in my penthouse." Clara pulled her hand back. "Alexander, you can't just... We need to be realistic. Money matters. The difference in our lifestyles matters. You live in a world I don't understand, with expectations and pressures I can't relate to. How do we navigate that?" "By being honest with each other, by communicating, by making sure we're on the same page about what matters." He paused. "What matters to you, Clara? What would you need from me to feel safe trying this?" She thought for a long moment. "Consistency. I need to see that you mean what you say. That when work gets demanding or something shiny and new catches your attention, you don't disappear again. I need to know I'm a priority, not an afterthought." "Done. What else?" "Integration, not separation. I don't want to be your secret or the girlfriend you keep separate from your real life. If we do this, I need to be part of your actual world, not hidden away." "Absolutely. What else?" "Patience. I'm going to have trust issues. I'm going to question things and need reassurance and probably drive you crazy with my insecurity about this. I need you to understand that's a consequence of what happened before." "I can do patience. I'll do whatever you need, Clara. Just tell me you're willing to try." Clara looked at him for a long moment, and Alexander saw the exact moment she made her decision. The wariness in her eyes softened, replaced by tentative hope. "Okay, let's try. But slowly, Alexander. We take this slow, and we see what happens." Relief flooded through him. "Slow works. I'll take whatever pace you're comfortable with. And we need ground rules. Name them. No expensive gifts. I'm serious. I don't want you throwing money at this relationship. If you buy me something, it should be thoughtful, not expensive." "Agreed. You meet my friends, my real friends, who don't care that you're rich and will absolutely judge you on character." "I'd love to meet your friends. And I meet your world too, not just the cleaned-up version, the real thing, your work, your colleagues, your life, all of it." "Deal. Anything else?" Clara smiled slightly. "Yeah, you have to come to my classroom, meet my students, see what I actually do with my days." "When?" "Next week we have a career day. Parents and community members come talk about their jobs." "I'll be there. What should I talk about?" "Technology, business, entrepreneurship. The kids will love it." She paused. "But Alexander, you have to make it accessible. Third graders don't care about profit margins and market share. They care about cool stories and big ideas." "I can do that. I remember being 8, before the business jargon and corporate speak." "Good, because if you bore my kids, we're done." She was joking, but Alexander heard the underlying truth. This was a test. Could he exist in her world? Could he connect with the things that mattered to her? Could he be someone who fit into her real life, instead of expecting her to fit into his manufactured one? "I won't let you down," he said seriously. "Not again. Not ever." Over the next 2 weeks, Alexander and Clara fell into a routine. Coffee 3 mornings a week before Clara's school day started. Dinner twice a week at places Clara chose, never fancy, always authentic. Texts throughout the day, quick check-ins, shared observations, the kind of constant low-level communication that built intimacy. Alexander learned to navigate Clara's world. He met her for lunch at the school cafeteria, eating mystery meat and canned vegetables, while she introduced him to her teacher friends who were politely skeptical of this wealthy CEO who'd suddenly appeared in Clara's life. He attended a school play, where Clara's students performed, sitting in an uncomfortable folding chair, and being genuinely moved by 8-year-olds singing off-key. And slowly, Clara began to trust that he meant what he'd said, that she was a priority, that he showed up when he promised, that he was trying. But there were challenges too. The first came when Alexander had to cancel a dinner because of an emergency board meeting. He'd texted Clara immediately, apologetic and frustrated, offering to reschedule for the next night. Clara's response had been short. "It's fine, work happens." But when they'd met for coffee the next morning, she'd been quiet, withdrawn. It had taken Alexander 30 minutes of gentle probing to get her to admit what was wrong. It reminded me," she'd finally said, "of how it started before. One cancelled dinner, then two, then you were too busy to call, too consumed with work to make time. And I know this is different. I know it was genuinely an emergency, but my brain went right back to that pattern. I'm sorry. I should have... What should I have done? Tell me how to handle it better next time." "You did handle it right. You texted immediately, you rescheduled. It's not about your behavior, it's about my reaction to it, and I need to work on that. We'll work on it together. And Clara, if you ever feel like I'm slipping into old patterns, tell me immediately. Don't let it build. Call me out." That had helped, but it had also shown them both how fragile this was, how much work rebuilding trust would require. The second challenge came when Clara met Alexander's business world. He'd invited her to a company event, nothing too formal, just a casual evening reception for Pierce Technologies staff. Clara had been nervous, worried about fitting in, and Alexander had spent the entire week reassuring her that she'd be fine. She'd worn a simple black dress, elegant but understated, and had gripped Alexander's hand tightly as they'd entered the event space. Alexander had introduced her to his executive team, to investors and board members, to the people who populated his daily life. Most had been polite and welcoming, but Alexander had seen the calculation in some eyes, assessing Clara's clothes, her background, her worth in terms that had nothing to do with who she actually was. The worst moment had come when Patricia Thornton, one of his major investors, had cornered them near the bar. "So, Clara, what do you do?" "I'm a third-grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary." Oh, how noble! The condescension had been barely concealed. That must be so rewarding in non-financial ways. Clara had smiled tightly. "It is. I get to shape young minds and make a real difference in children's lives. It's incredibly fulfilling." "I'm sure." Patricia had turned to Alexander. "Alexander, we need to discuss the quarterly projections. Do you have a moment?" It had been a clear dismissal of Clara, and Alexander had seen red. "Actually, Patricia, I'm here with Clara tonight. Work conversations can wait until Monday." Patricia's eyebrows had risen. "Of course. How refreshing to see you prioritize personal time." After she'd walked away, Clara had been quiet. "I don't fit here, do I?" "You fit with me, that's what matters. But these are your people. This is your world. And they look at me like I'm insufficient. Then they're wrong, and their opinions don't matter." Alexander had pulled her close. "Clara, I don't care what Patricia Thornton or anyone else thinks. You're more real, more valuable, more important than anyone in this room. Don't let their snobbery make you doubt that." But the damage had been done. The rest of the evening, Clara had been subdued, and Alexander had been furious at Patricia, at the culture he'd helped create, at the world that measured worth in bank accounts rather than character. On the drive home, Clara had been honest. "I don't know if I can do this regularly, be around people who look down on me because I chose a meaningful career over a lucrative one. You won't have to. I'll limit the events. And when you do come, I'll make it clear that disrespecting you means disrespecting me. You can't fight every battle for me, Alexander. Watch me." That had made her smile, but the concern had lingered. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong in someone's world, drop a comment. And if this story is resonating with you, please subscribe and share it. 3 weeks into their renewed relationship, Alexander showed up at Clara's classroom for career day. He'd been nervous all morning, wanting desperately to make a good impression on the children who mattered so much to Clara. The classroom was bright and chaotic. Student artwork covering the walls, desks arranged in pods, a reading corner with beanbag chairs and overflowing bookshelves. 23 eight-year-olds stared at him with undisguised curiosity as Clara introduced him. "Class, this is Mr. Pierce. He runs a technology company and he's going to tell us about his work." Alexander had prepared a presentation, but standing in front of these kids, he abandoned it. Instead, he sat on Clara's desk and said, "Who here uses a tablet or a computer?" Every hand shot up. "Cool. Well, my job is to help keep those devices safe. I create programs that protect your information, like your games, your photos, all the stuff that's important to you. Think of me like a superhero, except instead of fighting bad guys with punches, I fight them with code." "That's so cool," a little girl in the front row said. For the next 40 minutes, Alexander talked about technology in terms 8-year-olds could understand. He demonstrated simple coding concepts using colored blocks. He let them ask questions, and their questions were hilarious and insightful, everything from, "Are you rich?" "Yes," but he focused on how he got there, to, "Do you have a dog?" "No," but he was thinking about getting one. The highlight came when a boy named Marcus, same name as his business partner, asked, "Are you Ms. Bennett's boyfriend?" Alexander had looked at Clara, who'd turned pink. We're getting to know each other again. We were friends a long time ago, and now we're seeing if we can be more than friends." "You should be her boyfriend," a girl named Sophie announced. "Ms. Bennett is the best, and she deserves someone nice." "You're absolutely right," Alexander had agreed. "She does deserve someone nice. I'm trying very hard to be that person." After the presentation, as the children headed to recess, Clara had pulled Alexander aside. "You were amazing. They loved you. They're great kids. I can see why you love teaching." "Did you mean what you said about trying to be the person I deserve?" "Every word. Clara, watching you with these kids, seeing how much they adore you and how much you care about them, it reminded me why I fell in love with you in the first place. You have this incredible capacity for caring, for making people feel seen and valued, and I want to be worthy of that." Clara had kissed him then, right there in her classroom, with student artwork as their backdrop. It was their first real kiss since reconnecting, and it felt like a promise that maybe, just maybe, this could work. But the real test came a month into their relationship, when Alexander faced his biggest work crisis in years. A major security breach at Pierce Technologies threatened to destroy client trust and tank the company's valuation. Alexander spent 3 days barely sleeping, working around the clock to contain the damage and rebuild security protocols. During those 3 days, he texted Clara when he could, called her late at night to hear her voice, but couldn't see her in person. And he watched the pattern he'd sworn wouldn't repeat start to emerge, work consuming him, Clara getting pushed to the margins, the exact dynamic that had destroyed them before. On the 4th day, exhausted and overwhelmed, Alexander showed up at Clara's apartment at 10 p.m. without calling first. She opened the door in pajamas, clearly surprised. "Alexander, what are you okay?" He must have looked terrible because concern immediately replaced her surprise. "Can I come in?" "Of course." Clara stepped aside, and Alexander walked into her small living room, feeling the weight of the last 4 days crash over him. "I almost didn't come," he admitted. "I almost just kept working. Told myself I'd see you when the crisis was over, and then I realized that's exactly what I did before. Let work consume me. Let days turn into weeks, turn into months of putting you second." Clara guided him to her couch. "Sit down. You look like you're about to collapse." "I'm exhausted, but I needed you to know that even in the middle of the biggest work crisis I've faced in years, you're still my priority. I can't see you as much as I want right now, but I'm here. I'm showing up, even when it's hard." Clara sat beside him, taking his hand. "Tell me what's happening." So Alexander did. He explained the security breach, the potential financial damage, the emergency protocols, the press nightmare. And Clara listened, asked smart questions, offered perspective he hadn't considered. "You'll fix it," she said with complete confidence when he finished. because you're brilliant and you built this company on being better than everyone else at this exact thing. But Alexander, you can't do it alone. When's the last time you slept? Ate a real meal? I don't remember. Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to take a shower while I make you food. Then you're going to eat. And then you're going to sleep for at least 6 hours. You can't solve problems when you're running on fumes. I should get back. You should take care of yourself so you can actually function. Your team can handle things for one night. Trust them. It was exactly what he'd needed to hear. Can I stay here tonight? Clara hesitated only briefly. On the couch. We're taking things slow, remember? The couch is perfect. I just need to be near you. While Alexander showered in her tiny bathroom, Clara made him scrambled eggs and toast. Simple, warm, real food instead of the takeout he'd been surviving on. When he emerged in borrowed sweatpants and an old college t-shirt she'd kept, she handed him a plate and watched him eat like she was supervising a student at lunch. "Thank you," he said after he'd finished, "for this, for not being angry that I've been MIA for 4 days, for understanding. I'm not going to punish you for working hard when there's a genuine crisis. That's not fair. What would have made me angry is if you disappeared without explanation, stopped communicating, made me feel like I didn't matter. You didn't do that. You kept me informed. You showed up tonight even though you're exhausted. That's different than before. I'm trying to learn from my mistakes. I can see that." Clara took his plate, set it aside, and curled up next to him on the couch. "And I'm trying to learn too. To trust that work emergencies don't mean you're abandoning me. To give you space when you need it without feeling neglected. This is hard for both of us. But worth it? Yeah, worth it." Alexander fell asleep on Clara's couch with her fingers running through his hair, and for the first time in 4 days, he slept deeply. When he woke 6 hours later, there was a blanket over him and a note on the coffee table. "Had to go to school. There's breakfast in the fridge. You did great showing up last night. Keep doing that. C." The crisis took another week to fully resolve, but Alexander handled it differently than he would have before Clara. He delegated more, trusted his team, and made sure to carve out time for her even when work was demanding. It wasn't perfect. There were still late nights and missed dinners, but he communicated, he prioritized, and he showed her through actions that she mattered. And Clara noticed. She saw him fighting to be different, to break old patterns, to choose her even when it was inconvenient. And slowly, her trust grew. 2 months into their relationship, Alexander invited Clara to meet his mother. Eleanor Pierce lived in a beautiful home in the suburbs, the kind of place that spoke of old money and careful taste. Clara had been nervous all week, worried about making a good impression on the woman who'd raised Alexander. But Eleanor had greeted Clara with a warm hug and immediate acceptance. "So you're the girl my son has been in love with for 12 years, but was too stubborn to do anything about." Clara had laughed, surprised. "He told you about me?" "Not nearly enough, which is how I knew you mattered. Alexander only goes silent about the things that hurt. Come, sit. I want to hear everything." Over lunch in Eleanor's garden, the three of them had talked for hours. Eleanor shared stories about young Alexander, his determination even as a child, his tendency to get so focused on goals that he forgot to look up and see what was around him, his heartbreak after he'd left for California. He was miserable those first few years, Eleanor told Clara, while Alexander was inside getting more tea. "Oh, he was successful, and he'd call and tell me about his achievements, but I could hear it in his voice. He'd lost something essential. I asked him once if he regretted leaving someone behind. He denied it, but I knew." "Why didn't you push him?" Clara asked. "Because some lessons we have to learn ourselves. I couldn't make him see that success without love is empty. He had to figure that out on his own." Eleanor took Clara's hand. "I'm glad he finally did, and I'm even more glad you were willing to give him another chance." When Alexander returned, Clara and Eleanor were looking at photo albums, laughing at pictures of teenage Alexander with terrible haircuts and awkward smiles. "Mom, are you embarrassing me?" "Absolutely, it's my job." Eleanor smiled at her son with obvious love. "Clara, my son made a terrible mistake 12 years ago, but he spent every day since becoming the kind of man who deserves you. Don't let his past mistakes blind you to his present character. I'm trying not to, Clara said softly. After they left on the drive back to the city, Clara was quiet. Finally, she said, "Your mum is wonderful. She liked you, I could tell." "How could you tell?" "Because she brought out the photo albums. She only does that for people she wants to keep around." Clara smiled. "I liked her too. And Alexander, it meant something, meeting her, being included in that part of your life." "You're included in all parts of my life now. I meant what I said about integration." "I know. I'm starting to believe you actually mean everything you say." "I do." "Clara, I know I broke your trust before. I know I have to earn it back. But I need you to know, every day I wake up grateful you gave me this chance. Every day I choose you. That's not going to change. What if it gets hard? What if the honeymoon phase ends, and we're just two people trying to make different worlds fit together? Then we work at it, we communicate. We choose each other even when it's not easy. That's what commitment means." Clara was quiet for a moment. "I'm falling in love with you again. Or maybe I never stopped and I'm just admitting it now, but it scares me." Alexander pulled the car over, needing to have this conversation without the distraction of driving. He turned to face her fully. "It scares me too, because I know what it's like to lose you. I know how empty life is without you. And the thought of messing this up again terrifies me. So what do? We trust each other. We trust the process. We take it one day at a time, and we keep showing up." He took her hand. "Clara, I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you for 12 years, and I'm not going anywhere. Promise me. I promise. No more running. No more choosing work over us. No more cowardice. I'm all in." Clara leaned across the console and kissed him, and it felt different than their previous kisses. Deeper, more certain, like a door opening instead of just cracking. "I'm all in too," she whispered against his lips. Scared, but all in. 3 months into their relationship, they hit their first real fight. It started over something small. Alexander had bought Clara an expensive necklace for her birthday, despite her rule about no expensive gifts. "It's beautiful," she'd said when she opened it, "but Alexander, we agreed. No expensive gifts. It's your birthday. I wanted to give you something special." "Something thoughtful would have been special. This is just expensive." "Can't it be both?" "No, because you're using money to solve things again. That's what you always do. Throw money at problems instead of actually engaging with them." The accusation had stung. "That's not fair. I engage, I show up, I prioritize you. You do, but then you do things like this, and it reminds me of the gap between us. I can't reciprocate this kind of gift, Alexander. I can't afford it, and it makes me feel less than." "That's not what I intended." "I know what you intended, but impact matters more than intention." They'd argued for an hour, both frustrated, both feeling misunderstood. It had ended with Clara asking Alexander to leave, saying she needed space to think. Alexander had gone home to his penthouse feeling terrible. He'd genuinely thought the necklace would make her happy, had chosen it carefully, had wanted to show her how much she meant to him. But instead he'd made her feel inadequate, had highlighted the very differences he was trying to minimize. The next morning he'd shown up at her apartment with coffee and a handwritten letter. Clara had opened the door, still upset, but willing to talk. "I'm sorry," Alexander had said immediately. "You were right. I was using money as a shortcut instead of being thoughtful about what you actually needed. I got caught up in wanting to give you expensive things because I can, without thinking about how that would make you feel. I don't need expensive things, Alexander. I need you to listen when I tell you my boundaries and actually respect them." "I know, and I will. I'm returning the necklace." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. Because you were clear about what you needed and I ignored it. That's not okay." He'd handed her the letter. "This is what I should have given you. Read it when you're ready." The letter had been 10 pages long, handwritten, detailing every moment he loved about her, every way she'd changed his life, every reason he was grateful she'd given him a second chance. It had cost nothing and meant everything. When Clara had finished reading it, she'd been crying. This is perfect. This is what I needed. I'm still learning how to love you the way you need to be loved. I'm going to mess up sometimes, but I promise I'll always listen when you tell me I've gotten it wrong. And I promise to be patient while you learn, and to remember that your intentions are good even when the execution is off. They talked for hours after that, setting clearer boundaries, discussing expectations, learning how to fight productively instead of just hurting each other. And their relationship had come out stronger for it. 4 months in, Alexander made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He stepped back from the day-to-day operations of Pierce Technologies, promoting his VP to COO and shifting his own role to focus on strategy and long-term vision rather than constant crisis management. "I'm not abandoning the company," he'd explained to his board. "I'm restructuring my involvement so I can actually have a life outside of work. I've built an incredible team. It's time I trusted them to run things while I maintain oversight without drowning in operational details." Marcus had been supportive but concerned. "This is about Clara, isn't it? It's about not making the same mistakes twice. It's about recognizing that I built this company to have freedom, and somewhere along the way it became a prison. I want my time back. I want a life that includes the woman I love. Just make sure you're doing this for the right reasons. Don't resent her later if you miss the adrenaline of running everything." "I won't, because I've learned something important. The adrenaline of closing deals doesn't compare to the satisfaction of coming home to someone who actually cares about me, not my net worth." The restructuring gave Alexander his evenings back, his weekends back, his life back, and he spent that reclaimed time with Clara, attending her school events, meeting her friends, building a relationship that wasn't squeezed into the margins of his calendar. Clara noticed the change immediately. "You seem lighter, happier." "I am, because I'm finally living instead of just achieving. You gave me that. You gave that to yourself. I just reminded you it was possible." 5 months into their relationship, on a quiet Sunday morning in Clara's apartment, Alexander brought up the future. They were making breakfast together, a routine they'd fallen into on weekends, and he was watching her crack eggs into a bowl when the words just came out. "Move in with me." Clara looked up, surprised. "What?" "Move in with me. Not to my penthouse. I know you hate it there. We can find a place together, something that's ours, something that fits both of us." "Alexander, that's a big step." "I know, but Clara, I don't want to keep splitting our time between two places. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to build a life with you, not just date you." "We've only been together 5 months. Well, 5 months this time. We've known each other for 14 years. We've loved each other for most of that time, even when we were apart. How much more time do we need?" Clara set down the bowl, leaning against the counter. "I'm scared. What if we move in together and you realize I'm annoying to live with? What if the reality of sharing space kills what we have? Or what if it makes it better? What if waking up together and falling asleep together and navigating normal life together is exactly what we need?" Alexander moved closer. "I know it's fast. I know it's scary. But Clara, I'm 34 years old. I've wasted enough time. I don't want to waste any more. Let me think about it. Take all the time you need, but know that I'm ready, whenever you are." 2 weeks later, Clara had her answer. They were at Alexander's penthouse, one of the rare times she'd agreed to come there, when she said, "Okay." "Okay, what?" "Okay, let's find a place together. But I have conditions." "Name them." "Nothing too big. I don't need a mansion. Something comfortable, but not ostentatious. A real home, not a showpiece." "Done. What else?" "A neighborhood with character, real people, real community. Not some sterile luxury building where everyone's a stranger." "Agreed. Anything else?" "A space for me to work, a home office where I can grade papers and plan lessons, and room for bookshelves because I have a lot of books." Alexander smiled. "I love all of those conditions. Let's start looking this weekend." It took them a month to find the right place, a renovated brownstone in a tree-lined neighborhood, with enough space to feel comfortable but not so much that it felt empty. There was a modern kitchen, a cozy living room with a fireplace, 2 home offices, and a master bedroom with morning light that made Clara smile when she saw it. "This is perfect," she'd said. walking through the space for the third time. It feels like a home, not just a house. Then let's make it ours. They'd moved in together 6 months after reconnecting, and it had felt simultaneously terrifying and completely right.